Salute omnes, this is a video of all the techniques we've gone over so far in class as of August 22nd, I believe. Some of these might be familiar to your class but not others, so therefore some of these might not be quite familiar to you. If we haven't gone over them yet, we probably will, so just enjoy! Alright, first we have copycat, so make your hand into a cat, and the cat takes treats out of your hand. Right? This is the ASL sign for copy. And so this is copycat. And so when we do copycat, you do what I do and say what I say. So for example, if I go 1, you're also going to go 1. You have to move your head and say what I'm saying. Alright, so that's copycat. Then we have full. Full is measured from about your belly button up to your chin, and it shows how ready you are to learn. So for example, let's say that I got up this morning, but I didn't have a very good breakfast, I didn't sleep very well last night, and I just came from physics class, right? I might be very full. But let's say that I just came from art, and I love art, and I had a really good lunch, and I get to have a really good conversation with a friend of mine, right? I might be very empty, right? And this is bring it on, I'm so empty, I'm super ready to learn. Now if you go above your chin into this area, that means that we need to contact a third party, like your parents or guidance counselors or the police, because something happened that just ain't right. Alright, so that's full. Alright, distraction. You're going to point at whatever's distracting you, and you're going to make this sign behind your head near your ear. Alright, and so for example, let's say that we have class and there's change for lunch and the door's open and people are walking by and talking non-stop. Right? You might make this sign for distraction, and when somebody sees it, they'll close the door. Right? Or let's say that we're taking a test and somebody's clicking their pen constantly and doesn't realize it. If you make the sign and point at their pen, they might look up and go, oh, sorry, and then they'll stop. Right? Then we have mirabile! So we use mirabile for two things. First, if you make a mistake, right, and if you're just like, oh my gosh, oh no, it's a way to go, okay, it's going to be okay. So mirabile kind of relaxes you a little bit and makes you realize that it's not that big of a deal. We also use it if, say, you make a really great connection or a really great suggestion, or you've been thinking about something for a really long time and you haven't gotten it, and you haven't gotten it, and all of a sudden it just clicks. Then we also go, mirabile! Which means when somebody throws a mirabile, you don't know whether they've made a mistake or made a really awesome connection. Alright, let's see. Again. Again just means please show me again. I'd like to see that again. Now let's say that you know you're going to need to see it a couple times. That's when we use times 3. Okay? Times 3. So put your fingers up in a peace sign and a thumbs up and hit the back of your other hand. Times 3. Show me that 3 times. Tell me that 3 times. Then we've got slowly. Just means slow down. Please go a little bit slower. Right? Quickly. Please speed up. I've got it. Right? Louder. Please talk louder. I can't hear you. Quieter. Please speak quieter. Right? And then up at the top up here we have something called setup. Right? So setup is a way that you teach without having to use English and without having to explain something. So for example, this is a setup. Alright, can you guess what I'm trying to teach you if I show you these 3 things and say that they're flawless? This is a setup for yellow. Right? So let's say that I show you this. Right? Instead of telling you, by the way, the word for yellow is flawless, I'm going to show you a bunch of yellow things and say flawless. Now, that's what we call a setup. Right? The next one is prove it, and it goes right along with that. So let's say I do make this setup for flawless. Right? If you think you can prove it, right, you're going to make this sign. And then you're going to show me something that you think works with the setup. So for example, if you said prove it, and then you show me this, I will say, yes, you've proved it. Right? Whereas if you show me this, I might say, no, you haven't quite proved it yet. Right? So set up and prove it go hand in hand. We then have I don't understand. Right? I don't understand is when you don't understand something. Maybe not just a word, but an actual bigger thing that's going on. Like maybe I'm talking and it's all going over your head. I don't understand. Or there's something that, in particular, that you're like, well, I really don't see what she's getting at. Now, the neat thing about I don't understand and about mirabile is when one person does it, everybody does it. Right? And so the benefit of I don't understand is I can hear this if my back is turned. Right? Instead of somebody just sitting there looking at you while you have your hand raised, right? Instead you do this, and everybody else does it with you as if to say, we've got your back. We will get your questions answered. Right? Then we have mumbling. Mumbling. So let's say that you say something that is not technically correct, but I can understand what you're saying, and you are expressing your thought, and you're communicating with me effectively. Maybe not accurately, but effectively. I might say, okay, I got what you're saying. You're mumbling, but I got what you're saying. All right? So close enough is good enough for now, until we can get an accent adjustment. So that is accent. So let's say that you say something like, I food want. I might adjust your accent and say, oh, I want food. I'm going to adjust one small thing, just tweak it a little bit. Right? Now let's say that you say something to me like, I store tomorrow go. I might say, okay. You know? Or you might look at me and go, Mr. Marple, I store tomorrow go? Telling me, you know, I'd like that correction, please. And I might say, oh, I go to the store tomorrow. Or I will go to the store tomorrow. Right? You can also do this as in, I'm just trying to get my thought across. I don't need to be corrected right now. For example, let's say that you really need to use the restroom. Right? This might be one of those opportunities where you might say, latrina? Right? Because you don't want me sitting there going, Lakitne mihi ad latrinam ire? If you really have to go. Right? So this is mumbling, and this is accent. Then we have clear the battlefield. So clear the battlefield works for a couple of things. As far as classroom management goes, it works for doing this means clear your desks. We might do it before a quiz or before a classroom activity in which you don't need to be taking notes. Right? And so when I do this, it just means clear the battlefield. When we're doing things like setups, right? Like if I'm teaching you yellow and I happen to have these on a desk, but I also just from the last thing we did happen to have these things on a desk, it might get a little confusing. So we might say clear the battlefield so that you can really narrow down what I'm talking about at that specific moment in time. Let's see. Then we have Sorry Charlie. So before we get to Sorry Charlie, we need to talk about Travels with Charlie. So Travels with Charlie is Evan Gardner's take on the OPI from ACTFL, and it's amazing. So I'm going to give you a super abbreviated version, and if you need more information, please let me know. So the bottom one is novice, intermediate, advanced, expert, and distinguished. And this tells you where you are on a language scale, where your ability is. And so a better way, or maybe a more accessible way, would be Sesame Street, Dora the Explorer, Larry King, and Charlie Rose, which is why it's called Travels with Charlie. And it just talks about your ability to use the language. And we can use this for other things besides the language. For example, with guitar, I'm here. I can recognize a guitar. All right? I might be even here. I can play a couple of chords. That's about it. Whereas, say, with cooking, I'm a little bit closer to here. Right? I can follow directions. I can make some of my own recipes. Right? And so it's just a skill level. So this itself is called Travels with Charlie. And Sorry Charlie is this. Sorry Charlie is when perhaps your level is here and somebody else is talking to you or trying to communicate with you at this level or this level, right? And then you say, hey, you're just talking above my level. You know, I need you to bring it down because I'm not capable of understanding that yet, right? Okay, and then we have no pressure refresher. A no pressure refresher is simply, hey, let's review. Let's go over a couple of things just so that we can see them again. So why don't we go ahead and do a no pressure refresher of the techniques. We've got copycat, full, or here, wherever you are, distraction, mirabile, mirabile! Again, times 3, slowly, quickly, louder, quieter, set up, prove it, I don't understand, mumbling, accent, clear the battlefield, travels with Charlie, sorry Charlie, and no pressure refresher. We then have stop. Right, this is particularly useful when, say, we're doing copycatting. Then I can tell you when to stop copycatting so that I know that you'll be able to answer questions instead of just copying what I'm doing the whole time. We have the meadow. So let's say that you're really, really full. Right? The meadow is a place that you can go to get kind of unfull. Now we do a couple of things in class called power meadows. Like we might discuss, if you were a unicorn, what would you do? Or what are your feelings on pickles? Or we might do a silly little song, right? But in our class, the meadow consists of 2 little timers that are passes, right? And so, actually, let me grab them. Hold on 1 second. So here are the meadow timers. Right? And so each one will normally be set for 5 minutes. And if you are really, really full and you just need to take a 5-minute break, what you do is you grab one of these, well you grab both of them, and you press start. Then you leave one on the board in the classroom and take the other one with you as a pass. All right? When it goes off, you have to come back to class. And so that way, you kind of get your break, right? But I know where you are. And so I don't have to freak out that you were abducted by aliens. All right. Let's see. Then we have rise above. Kind of like a football pose. So sometimes we're going to have a distraction that you're just going to have to rise above. For example, we might have the Spanish class is doing a listening activity and it's loud. Or we might have the psychology class listening to a video and it's loud. Or we might have them announcing books over the intercom constantly. Or somebody is mowing grass outside. Those are things that we cannot do anything about. And so rise above is our way of acknowledging that there is a distraction. Right? We acknowledge that it's a distraction and that it's not optimal. But saying, we're just going to have to try to get over it. But in a really we love you kind of way. Alright, then we have something that we've made up this year called Ninja Awesome Sauce. So a lot of the time in this classroom, you're going to be up out of your seat and you're going to be using props and you're going to be making your own setups and doing some prove-its, right? Which means that it'll get a little bit chaotic in here and probably a lot messy, right? But since I love all of you and am not your mother, I do not want to clean up after 26, 27 teenagers every day after every class. So when I do Ninja Awesome Sauce, it means you pretend that you've just broken into somebody's house and you are a ninja and you've put things all out of place. And now, as quickly and as quietly and as ninja-like as possible, you're going to put everything back exactly where it belonged so nobody knows you were here. So yes, Ninja Awesome Sauce is a fancy way of saying clean up, but it's way more fun to say Ninja Awesome Sauce. We then have Make It Rain. So let's say that you learn a piece of language from me or from another student. For example, you might learn flawless before somebody else does. Right? If I tell you to make it rain, it's then your job to go teach at least 2 or 3 other students what flawless is, using a setup. right? Not translating, but using a setup and explaining it to them, if at all, in Latin, right? A demonstration is better than an explanation, so hopefully you'll demonstrate it. But using setups, right, you want to make it rain, which is share the wealth, share the knowledge that you've acquired. Then we have the exact opposite of that, which is, brother, can you spare a dime? So make it rain, hand going away from you. Brother, can you spare a dime? Hand coming towards you. So let's say that you missed a day of class, right, and you need to catch up. This is basically catch me up. Brother, can you spare a dime? Or let's say that you're out in guidance for about 15 minutes and you come back and you've missed some stuff. You just go up to a friend and you say, okay, brother, can you spare a dime? You know, just catch me up. Basically, please share the wealth with me. Okay? Then we have something called backwards buildup. All right, so that's for when we have particularly long words or sentences and they're kind of difficult to say. So we might start at the back and work our way forward, hence backwards buildup. For example, mirabile, lei, bile, rabile, mirabile. Right, that is the backwards buildup of mirabile. Right, so you might have a difficult time pronouncing it at first, but hopefully after doing a backwards buildup, it'll make it a little easier for you to kind of wrap your mind around. And we also have limits. So there are going to be some times in class when questions come up and it's just not the right time for them. And it doesn't mean that it's not important information. It just means that we might be working on one thing and really going after it, and something might be kind of passing us in a different path, and we just need to limit what we're looking at to be effective. So for example, let's say that 10, 15, maybe 20 years from now, you have a little 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old comes to you and says, Mommy, Daddy, where do babies come from? All right, that's a limit situation. Is that very important information? Yes, it is extremely important information. Do you really want to explain it in detail to your 4-year-old? Maybe not. So that might be something where it's like, you're not ready to have that information yet, or we're not quite there yet. All right, then we have a couple more. I know this is a lot, it'll be okay. All right, so we have, obviously, right, you got to get your 12-year-old girl on for this. Obviously, right, and so that's something where, for example, if you're making a setup or something in class, I'm sorry, oh, excuse me, you want to make it as obvious as possible, right? And so let's say that somebody else is making a setup and it's not quite clear to you. You might make the obvious sign to say, can you make it more obvious? Can you make something that's a little bit more concrete for me? Right? We also have something called a hip list, and we're going to get into this a little bit more this week. This is a list of things, either in Latin or in English, that you would like to be able to say. So for English, let's say that you're like, man, I don't really know how to say the color blue in Latin, right? You might put that on your English hip list. And so then later, when we have time, you can make a setup for me of a bunch of things that are blue, and I might be like, oh, Caeruleus, right? And that's how you can get that across. Now, the Latin side of it is something that you've heard and you don't quite understand, right? So for example, we might be doing something in class and you hear a word or you hear an ending and you're like, I don't quite have that yet. You would just put that on your list, right? And hunt for it a little bit later. You might make a setup, or you might ask me, you might say, okay, can you make a setup for this, right? To make it a little more clear to you what it means. Like I said, we're going to get into that a lot more this coming week. We also have wingman, and that is when you make sure you have a buddy going with you when we're doing hunting. So for those of you in Latin 1, we're not here yet. We're going to be here kind of soon, right? But we're not here yet. For those of you in Latin 2, right, remember when we were hunting in class, and some of you naturally picked up wingmen, so that there were 2 of you going to places instead of just 1. It's a little less intimidating. It's kind of like having a built-in friend, but in a good, not sad way. And then we have verbum. Verbum. That's when we're reading something or we're doing something in class and there's just one word that sticks out to you and you just really don't know what it means. Right? So for example, let's say I'm talking and you hear solve. You might go, solve? And then I'll give you a setup, right? Or in Latin, I'll explain to you in some way what that means. And lastly, we have pick one. Pick one. Pick one. So there are going to be times where we're doing something and there are 4 or 5 different new things that come up, right? And this goes hand in hand with limits, right? There are going to be 4 or 5 things that come up and you're just like, oh, I want to learn all these things at the same time. You need to pick one, because if you don't pick just one, right, it's going to get very confusing very quickly. It's almost like when you're doing a science experiment and you need to kind of narrow down the options to one variable changing every time, because that's going to give you a better understanding of how it affects everything else. Right? So pick one. So these are the techniques that we've done so far in class. As I said, they are from Where Are Your Keys, which was created by Evan Gardner. These are not things that I have created. The only one that we have created as a class thus far is Ninja Awesome Sauce. That is completely our own, and I look forward to making more such wonderful and delightful things in the future. But if you would like to know more about Evan Gardner and his language learning technique, Where Are Your Keys, please let me know. It's kind of amazing. So have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you in class. Walay Skipuli!